I'm Philip, one of the co-founders of Spice, and so I'll be building off the HTTP connector that I showed in the previous one. And so we've got a new refresh mode that we've just added in 1.10, which we're calling the caching refresh mode. It's currently only supported for HTTP-based datasets. And the way it works is instead of most of our other refresh modes where we basically request all the data from the source up front, for the HTTP one, because it's a bit more dynamic, we don't know up front what all requests that your application might want to hit. The caching refresh mode is a bit more reactive in that once you make a request, it will actually fetch that data and store it in the acceleration. This is very similar to the results cache that William showed on the call as well, but it's a bit different because it works more similarly to an acceleration in that you have more control. You can actually persist it to file. And so if the instance restarts in the results cache scenario, you lose all of those results. But in the acceleration mode, you actually can reload those acceleration files and you still have the same caching data that you have. We also support stale-while-revalidate, similar to the results cache, but it's at the the acceleration layer where you can configure a similar two TTLs, one for how long an item should be living for, and then a second TTL for when we should do a background refresh. So I'll go ahead and actually show how this is configured. So I've got here my Spice pod. I'm connecting to a localhost API. All it does is basically just give me the current time at an endpoint. And so that will allow us to more easily validate the behavior of the request. I've set my request filters, etc. I've also set max retries to 0 here. I don't want it to retry. That'll become important in a second. But here on the acceleration, I've set it to true. You'll notice that I have my results cache turned off for this demo, and I'm only using the acceleration. I've set the refresh mode to the new caching behavior. And then I've got here these two TTLs that I was talking about. This caching TTL is how long we want the item to live. So after we get it, we expect it to be fresh for about 5 seconds. And then this stale-while-revalidate TTL is after the initial 5 seconds has passed. If we get a request in this 10-second window, where we'll turn the data that we already have cached, but then we'll do a background refresh. So that's the Spice pod. I've also got here a little time server that I'm running that actually will show the recent requests, the times to last request, which we'll use to demonstrate this. And then I've also got Spice here that is connected to that time server. So I'll go over here and my time server can actually do a delay. So here I'm going to just configure it to delay to a second so it's easier to verify whether it's cached or not. So if I do a request here for request path content, and then we'll see that the current time here, we've got 28 seconds passed, and it took about a second to return. It's already been 5 seconds. So if I do another query here, we'll see that it's still fast, but it was within that refresh while we validate. So we actually see on the server, we got another request for 39 seconds. So if I do another request here, we'll see that I got 39. So it actually got the new request. But then again, because we're past 5 seconds, we got another one for 51. So if I do this, we'll see we get 51. But then if I keep doing requests within a 5 second window, you'll see that this time stays at 02. And I never get a long 1 second request because we're always doing the kind of the refresh in the background. So I'll wait 15 seconds. So that means we'll pass the initial cache TTL and the stale-while-revalidate. And if I do a request now, you'll see that it takes a second because we were past that kind of 15-second window of where we consider a thing to be acceptable. So that's a small demonstration of using the caching accelerator itself. This is very similar to how the results caching work, but again, because we can store this in an acceleration file, it allows us to persist these results over time if that's important for our use case. Another thing that's cool about this is we can actually handle errors. So I actually can change my server to respond with errors. So if I do another request here, by default, we'll get an error if the server responds with a 500 internal error. But if we already have a cached result, it may be better for our application to get the cached result than to get an error. And so in the Spice pod, we can actually configure that to this new parameter, caching stale if error enabled. So I'll go ahead and enable that and rerun Spice. And with that parameter enabled, now whenever there's an error from the API, instead of returning the error, it'll actually return the cache result. So I'll go ahead and switch it back to returning 500 error, and then I'll keep doing requests on my server And you'll notice that in the background, Spice is getting these 500s, but because we've configured it to return, even though there's a 500, it's still giving us the cache result in this case. And yeah, that's a small demo of how we can use the caching accelerator to make sure that our application still gets data even if the backend API goes down, and allows us to reuse these cache results across restarts.